The ASM Hydrasynth. What is it? Developed by Ashton Sound Machines and released in 2021, the synthesizer has taken the community by storm due to its innovative design and versatile sound engine. The Hydrasynth combines traditional subtractive synthesis with modern wavetable synthesis to create an unbelievable sound palette that is very versatile and can be used in almost any genre. This synth can really sound like anything, and when I say anything, I mean anything. Today, we're diving headfirst into a captivating sonic showdown, pitting two synthesizer giants against each other in a battle of soundscape and textures. In one corner we have the digital synthesizer that's dominated the VST realm, Serum, made by X4 Records. And in the other corner we have a synthesizer that's been making waves, Sine, Sawtooth, and Square alike, the ASM Hydrasynth. Whether you're a sound sorcerer or just an audio adventurer, this video will definitely have something for you in store, so make sure you stick to the end, where we compare two of my favorite synthesizers, Serum and the ASM Hydrasynth. Enjoy. So let's talk about Serum a little bit. Serum is one of my favorite plugins, if not my favorite plugin, that I've used for the majority of the time I've made music. It's worked its way so integrally into my workflow that not even freaking Hulk could rip the two apart. I mean, like, this plugin has been used in every single one of my songs, and I can guarantee that. That being said, I've learned that there are some limitations with the VST that I thought once was limitless, and one of those is its deficit in physical modeling. And when I say physical modeling, I'm talking about making string sounds, typically made using the Car plus Strong method, which Serum just doesn't have a really good, engine for that. And that's kind of where I began to look for other VSTs to achieve those string-like sounds. And I was about to pull the trigger on Plasmonic when we received a new order of synthesizers in at the place that I work, which is called Patchworks. It's a synthesizer boutique, and I realized that these synthesizers were Hydrasynths, and I had heard of the elusive Hydrasynth, but I had never gotten to actually use one. So I felt like this was an opportunity to try my sound design wits at the Hydrasynth, and I quickly realized that it is very similar to Serum, with a lot of benefits that Serum does not have, which I'll touch on in this video. Now let's talk about physical modeling a little bit more. So I posted a video on my TikTok and Instagram using Serum to try and create a strings preset, though there were some drawbacks to this. It quickly went out of tune if you went just above an octave or below an octave, so in other words, it was kind of unusable. At the end of the day, Serum excels at subtractive synthesis, and yeah, it can do additive synthesis, but I'd argue that it's more of a subtractive synth. And quickly, if you don't know the difference between additive and subtractive additive synthesis is when you add harmonics to reach a desired sound, while subtractive synthesis is when you start with a harmonically dense tone like a sawtooth wave and subtract harmonics using filters and whatnot. So I was stuck between choosing the Hydrasynth and maybe a physical modeling VST, and I'll tell you why I chose the Hydrasynth. It was because, honestly, none of the VSTs were really clicking for me, and this isn't at the fault of the VST. I found more pleasure in using the Hydrasynth, and this is because it was so similar to Serum, a synthesizer that I've used for years and am very used to. So it was an obvious decision to go with the Hydrasynth. So let's take a little look into the comparisons between Serum and the Hydrasynth. First of all, they both have 3 oscillators. 2 of these oscillators go straight into filters, while 1 oscillator is a sub-oscillator. So on Serum, where you have the ability to choose between FMing, pulse modulation, sync, etc., you have a similar thing on the Hydrasynth, except they're called mutators. These are a lot more powerful than what Serum has to offer because there are 6 individual parameters that can be modulated separately from each other, including a dry wet, which is super useful because if you like the harsh sound of an FM synth but you don't want to fully commit to those harsh tones, but you want to keep the harmonics, you can just turn the dry wet down, and that's super awesome. Also, specifically for the FM mutator, you also have the option to FM from oscillator A, oscillator B, oscillator C, aka 1, 2, and 3, or each of the 4 mutators. But say you want to frick around with a bunch of different oscillators and settings and you don't want to FM from any of those, and you just want to FM from a pure sine wave. Well, you can do that because you can choose to FM from a set of wave types, which is incredible. And that's just the FM mutator. There's a total of 8 different mutators that you can choose from, which include FM, of course, wave stack, harmonic, phase diff, 3 different types of pulse modulation, and oscillator sync. Phase diff being my favorite one because it is the one that is capable of creating the string sounds that I struggled with in Serum. If you are familiar with Serum, then you are probably familiar with the struggle of only having 1 pre-filter. Things have changed if you use the Hydrasynth because now you have 2 pre-filters filters. Thank the Lord. Now, I'll admit both of these filters are not as powerful as the Serum filters, as they don't have any reverb filter, comb filter, anything like that. They're pretty generic filters, but what it loses in the filters it makes up with mutants, because you can really achieve the same sound with a comb filter as you can with a mutant on phase diff with some feedback on it. They're pretty much the same exact thing. So let's talk a little bit about effects. On the Hydrasynth, you have a pre-effects, which you can choose between chorus, flanger, rotary, phaser, lo-fi, tremolo, EQ, compressor, or distortion, and then you have a dedicated delay and reverb, and then a post-effects, which you can choose from the same set of effects as the pre-effects. So if you're an Effect Andy and like having the ability to run 10 simultaneous effects like you can on Serum, then you're probably not going to like this section. But again, I keep coming back to these mutants because they're so powerful. What you can achieve with the effects on Serum, you can probably achieve with the mutants on the Hydrasynth. Honestly, I don't find too many drawbacks to only having 2 effects that you can choose from, that being usually chorus and distortion. The only thing that I would really like to see is a multi-band compressor being added, which it doesn't have. It does have a compressor, although it isn't multi-band as far as I can tell. So when it comes to effects, Serum kinda wins, but again, mutators are just so powerful that it almost doesn't matter. The mod matrix is one of my favorite things that Serum has to offer, and the Hydrasynth has the same type of mod matrix that Serum has. Both of them are 32 slot, so you can really modulate anything from anything. Pretty standard mod matrix. The difference is Serum has a very nice way of visualizing kind of how the modulation matrix is working, while the Hydrasynth doesn't have that. It's only values and parameters that you can adjust, which isn't a problem for me personally because I've used Serum for so long and can understand how the mod matrix works without having to see visualizations, though it is very helpful if you're confused about what source is modulating what. Another thing is the Serum mod matrix has tension, which the Hydrasynth mod matrix does not have, which is a little unfortunate, although the Hydrasynth does have the ability to modulate the depth of mod matrices as well as modulate macros via the mod matrix and vice versa. So it is immensely powerful. Though both mod matrices are immensely powerful, so if I had to pick a winner here, I'd say it's probably a tie. Finally, macros. Like I said, you can modulate macros via the mod matrix, so that's a plus side for the Hydrasynth. It can get kind of confusing at times, but there's some times where you really need it, and it just really comes in handy. So that's definitely a win. The second part of macros is that the Hydrasynth has 8. Rather than Serum, which has 4. Do you know how many times I've been using Serum and just wished I had one more macro? So often that I think this kind of just wipes the whole thing. The Hydrasynth wins when it comes to macros. So when it comes to LFOs and envelopes, I think that the Hydrasynth wins when it comes to envelopes because it has 5, and they work in almost the exact same way with a attack, hold, sustain, decay, and release. You can change the trigger mode on the Hydrasynth, which is really nice. However, there's one thing that Serum does better when it comes to LFOs, and that's being able to modulate the shape of the LFO, which as far as I can tell, you can't really do on the Hydrasynth. You can use other LFOs to modulate the rate and the level and the depth of other LFOs, but modulating the shape itself is a little bit more complicated because you can't map parameters and modulators to certain points or nodes on the LFOs. So to summarize, mutators, huge plus, since I can't really even compare them to Serum's FM and pitch wave modulation. I think we can say that when it comes to the main sound designing function of both of these synthesizers, the Hydrasynth wins. When it comes to envelopes, Hydrasynth wins. When it comes to effects, Serum wins. When it comes to LFOs, Serum wins. When it comes to filters, the Hydrasynth wins. And overall, I think the Hydrasynth wins. So here's some things that I'm not going to compare to each other because it's just not worth comparing. And that first one is poly aftertouch. I'm not going to fault Serum for not having poly aftertouch, as it wasn't designed to have it. So that's like saying, yeah, this fish is stupid because it can't climb a tree. Similarly, in the voice section of the Hydrasynth, you have the ability to turn on warm mode, which is supposed to emulate the sound of analog synthesizers, which I'm again not going to fault Serum for not having, because why would it? I think Serum is like very self-aware that it is very digital, so I don't really fault it for not having that. However, I will fault the Hydrasynth for only having 8 voices. Yeah, it can do unison mode, but Serum can do unison mode with 16 voices and polyphony. So I think when it comes to voices in general, Serum wins. I don't know the true reason why they don't have more voices on the Hydrasynth, but I can assume it's a hardware limitation. CPU advantage definitely goes to any VSTs, where this is a standalone synthesizer, so it doesn't rely on your computer or any other hardware to run. That being said, I don't think it's too much of a disadvantage, because I used to use Unison a lot, but currently, I've not been using Unison, and in fact, I haven't used Unison a single time while sound designing on the Hydrasynth. I would like more voices though. Win goes to Serum, but I'm not too mad about it. The Hydrasynth also sports an arpeggiator, which is pretty cool, but since I'm usually using this to record into my DAW, I prefer using MIDI anyways, so I'm not gonna really go too much into detail about it because honestly, I haven't used it much. Now that kind of concludes the comparison part of the video. Now I'm going to show you just a little bit how I use the Hydrasynth. We're going to just take a look at a few of the patches that I've made, and then we're going to design a new patch that has a unspecified direction. I'm just going to kind of sound design something that sounds cool. So let's check out some of these patches that I've made. This is a pan patch, so I tried to like mimic a hand pan when making this. It ended up kind of turning into like a plucked string. So each of these knobs are macros which control things in the mod matrix and also control things directly. So if I go to the mod matrix, these are all the modulation sources and destinations. And you can see, like, for example, envelope 1 is going to mutant 1 depth. So essentially, both of these envelopes either control the amplitude or the filter. And this harmonic is changing depth of mutant 1. So if I go to mutant 1 here and go to depth, if I change this manually, you can hear different harmonics being accentuated. That's kind of how you get the tone that you want out of some of these harmonics. And same with the frequency. Frequency is corresponding to the depth of mutant 2. Go to mutant 2, this should be phase diff. And if I change this myself, you can hear that it makes a slightly different sound. So there we go, kind of have somewhat of a hand pan sound. And that's what I love about the Hydrasynth, is you can really get some realistic sounds out of it by using the feedback as well as the harmonic and frequency and phase diff. So let's take a look at another patch. It does sound a little bit more digital. You can tell that it's not a recording, but it uses kind of some of the similar techniques here. This one's using FM, and then we have our tone and harmonic, which are gonna kind of change what the sound sounds like. Again, pretty cool sounds here. Vocal, which I tried to kind of mimic what vocal tones sound like. So we have our formant, tremolo, control, which is just kind of changing the overall like vowel shape, and then our bass waveform. So this is kind of cool because this basically is acting as a wavetable. One thing about the Hydrasynth, it doesn't have set wavetables that you can choose from. It does, however, have set waves that you can choose from in order to make your own wavetables. So basically, it prioritizes the ability to make your own wavetables rather than giving you set wavetables. For example, if I go to the wave list, you can see that I have Horizon 1 through Horizon 7 here, and then I have Cluster 2. So if I look at each of these individual waves, you can see that they all look different. What WaveScan does is modulates between all of the different wavetables very smoothly. So you're essentially creating your own wavetables by doing this, which is really neat, and it's definitely something different. If you want to like smoothly modulate between a square wave and a sine wave, you can easily do that. Let me just create a new init patch here. If I just go to oscillator 1 and I choose WaveScan, edit scan, and if I go to wave 8, change it to square, you can see that in between here I can modulate between the two, which is just a really useful feature if you're trying to get a wave that doesn't exist in the massive set of waves that you already get. I'm just gonna scroll through this. I'll go, you know, there are a lot of waves here to choose from. I don't know the amount, but if you want a wave, it's probably in here. This is cool, the harmonics. Some of the patches that I made to try to mimic certain synthesizers. So we have the MS-10. If you've ever used an MS-10, you'll notice the LFO is a kind of a big part of it. And then I have kind of just things that define the synthesizer most. So for example, like if you've ever used an ARP 2600, there's 3 oscillators and then each can be FM'd from each other. So this is an ARP 2600. And then this is my Hydrasynth. Even though it's not perfect, it's not able to create every sound that the ARP 2600 can create, but it can create some of the more recognizable ones, in my opinion. It can sound like many other synthesizers as well, including an AX80. And that's because it has a very good analog engine. If I go over to the voice here, you can see this analog FL. This basically changes how analog sounding your patch will be. You can hear that kind of like analog harmonic dissonance. I don't know how to really explain it. If I modulate between the two, no analog, full analog. So it's a small difference, but if your ears are tuned to hear the difference between the two, if you've used analog synthesizers and you've used digital synthesizers, then you might be able to tell the difference. Personally, I like the sound of the analog a little bit more when it comes to specifically creating analog synthesizers. Then we have a Rhodes. At the point I'm at, I'm like basically, I'm pretty sure that if any normal person heard both of them, they wouldn't be able to tell the difference. And if I change the top, you can hear more of that upper harmonic, the body, more mids, more lows. This analog is just changing the voice. Then you have your speed and tremolo to get that classic Rhodes sound. Then we have a flute, which utilizes the oscillator sync. Then you have your feedback, which essentially sends the signal back through the oscillator sync. That's how you really achieve some realistic sounds. It kind of utilizes the same principle that the Car Plus Strong method uses, which is basically taking a feedback and then running it through a filter and an attenuator and then sending it back through the signal chain. So that way you can create kind of resonant tones that would mimic that of what you would hear in real life when you're playing string instruments. Let's start with just a single sine wave. Nothing too special there. And let's change the amplitude, attack, and release just a little bit. And then let's change mutant 1 to oscillator sync. Change this to 64. And let's change this ratio to 1. And just out of curiosity, I want to see what happens if I change this to also oscillator sync. Oh. Okay, so the cool thing about feedback is that it's reliant on what happened previously. So if I like play this without any depth, it's going to create this tone every time. But if I add the depth a little bit, and then take the depth away, we get a completely different tone. So what's cool about that is we can create basically a noise LFO. Let's change this to noise. And then we'll go to mod matrix and assign this noise LFO to our mutant 2 depth. And we'll change it to 128. And then we'll create a envelope here that immediately goes down to 0 within like 14 milliseconds. And then modulate the depth of this mod matrix with the envelope. So if we go to mod matrix 1 depth and go like that, and then we set this to 0. Now we get a randomized sound every time we play a note. And that's really good because when you play a string instrument or any type of instrument like that, you're never going to get the same sound twice. That's the whole conundrum when it comes to making realistic sounding things, because you can't use samples because samples always sound the same. And you can't use regular algorithms like you can with like FM because FM will always sound the same. It's digital. So this is a way to kind of randomize the tones that you're getting. And if I don't want it to be randomized as much, I I assume I can just turn this down a little bit. If I just change this to like 2. Maybe if I change this to mutant 1. Let's change this to phase diff. And then let's go to mod matrix and then change this to mutant 1 depth. And then let's put envelope 1, which is normaled to the filter, on dry wet of 1 and 2. So we can do that by going to envelope 1 and then mutant 1, dry wet, crank that up. And then if we go to mutant 1, turn the dry wet down, then do the same thing but with mutant 2. Then we go here, turn that down. Now we kind of have this like weird randomized string sound. I'm interested what happens if we take envelope 2, which is normal to the amplitude, and put that on our mutant 2. And realistic instruments usually have logarithmic fall off. So if I change this right here to log, and then I change this release as well to log, and this decay, we get a more kind of like realistic sounding profile here. Just curious what happens if I change the ratio here. Let's go back to the mod matrix and change this depth a little bit. A better sounding tone to the ears. And then we can go over to our filter 2 and let's run these in parallel. So that way, since we're using a low pass filter, it won't cut out any of that lower frequencies. I do something like this. You can also add reverb. And then we have another post effect, which we can choose something like chorus if we want. So yeah, that was just a little sound design demo here for the Hydrasynth. I hope you enjoyed. If you like this video, make sure to drop a like and maybe hit that subscribe button. I'm really enjoying the Hydrasynth. I think I want to make more videos using it. Let me know if you like this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.